Chapter 102. Ones and Zeros. "Nikki, you want me to tell you my story?" asked Michael faintly, holding a smile. Nikki nodded and felt overwhelmed with anticipation as to what was going on here. Hoping Michael's story now might have an answer, Michael lifted up his pupils, brought them down, then began. "That whole night, Gabe said I had abandonment issues. I didn't know how bad I had it until I came back here. How he understood me so well, I'll never know." Nikki flinched over that matter, hearing Michael mention Gabe, since Nikki always sort of had an idea as to why that was. "I've always gotten the feeling that he, for Michael, felt, yeah. And then, wait a second, is he..." Nikki saw Michael finally catching on. "Honestly, Michael, I can't tell. Gabe always had a secretive side to him, and I've never seen him with a girl," mentioned Nikki. Michael then chuckled, shrugged, and then said, "Well, that doesn't matter to me. Only a real friend I've had, and that's all that matters." Michael then paused, frowned up a bit, and continued. "Nikki, this is going to be a lot to take in, and I don't know how to explain it all. Do you understand?" asked Michael, half-heartedly. "Yes," said Nikki, not wanting to hear Michael out. "I mean, a lot. Like you had a lot to get off your chest. I have..." "What's really troubling you? Tell me," asked Nikki, wanting to get to the root of it. "I'll get to it." "Michael, you can tell..." "No, I'll get to it," said Michael as he shivered a bit and took a gulp of dread. Nikki now saw how difficult it was going to be for Michael. Truthfully, she wanted to do to him what he did for her and be direct and stir the emotion up, since she now felt that was the best way to resolve it. But Michael wants to explain, let him. Thought Nikki wanted to give him a chance. "Anyways, you remember that Black Panther activist I told you about?" asked Michael. Nikki nodded. "Well, like I said, he tried to teach me a lot of things. His name was Louis Gaius Torrance, by the way, and him, seeing how I was back then when I first came to prison, the first thing he tried to teach me and make me understand was an idea called Think Therefore I Am. Have you ever heard of that?" Nikki shook her head. "Well, LG said the real meaning behind that line was different from his interpretation. You see, when he had first read that line, he had imagined something else based on his experiences." "Okay," said Nikki, now completely absorbed by the story, unsure where it would lead up to. "His idea of think therefore I am was whatever people think they become. The reason he was trying to teach me this was he saw how stupid as shit illiterate I was, or really, I thought I was, and he wanted to teach me that was my problem." "Michael, you're not stupid," said Nikki, remembering how Michael always had his brilliant moments in the rough. "Thanks, but anyways, LG was beginning to grow really irritated with my attitude about how I saw myself. He kept trying to teach me things, and I'd throw my arms up in the air, and I would tell him I'm too dumb for this stuff. I keep trying to bring myself down, and that's what he found really irritating. He said that in his experience, he's met a lot of people like me, brilliant people, being his word, that wasted their potential being this way, thinking less of themselves." Michael sighed, and Nikki then realized there were a few convicts with their visitors around her, also paying attention to his story. Anyways, he'd say, "You keep thinking you're dumber than dirt. That's all you'll ever be." Of course, I didn't believe him, thinking I could actually be different. But then he decided to give me an IQ test to prove it. "He gave you an IQ test? What did you get?" asked Nikki, really curious to see how well Michael could do beyond just sticking with his fist. "I got 154, he said. "There, you're practically a fucking genius," answered Michael as he shrugged a bit, as if he still couldn't believe it himself. "Go on," said Nikki, remembering from high school her score had come out to be 133. "Well, at that point, it blew my mind away. I never could have imagined it could be so high. He told me that people with those scores tend to work for NASA, not Fred Sharnick's auto repair. But then he told me something called an EI, which involves emotional intelligence or stability. And what he told me was even with really high intelligence, I was still an emotionally bankrupt person. And that was what my problem really was. Nikki looked to one side as she realized with Michael how true that was. He brought up how his brother was like that back when he was younger. Just a straight D student, spent most of the time in the back of the class clowning around like an idiot, bored to tears or sleeping. But then he could read a book like James Joyce's Ulysses in a few days, understand it completely, then go to Harvard and wipe the floor with the professors of literature there, arguing about it. Then later go home, buy some smack, and shoot it into his veins every day, wishing his next hit would OD him, which eventually did. Recounted Michael as the story began to grow dark. Michael, you're not that bad, reassured Nikki, but cringing a bit inside from the possibility. Really, Nikki? Really? Michael, just go on, said Nikki, hoping something positive could be brought out from this story. I don't like the direction this is going. This sounds like a lot of overthinking on Michael's part, and I really just don't like where this is going. Nikki, he also said that sometimes people like me that are in a bankrupt emotional state might end up using their intelligence self-destructively. Or in other words, he said, if your heart isn't in the right place, then your mind definitely won't be. Nikki sighed. Nikki, there's something else. What? Gasped Nikki, feeling worn in already. Recently, we had a shrink here in Attica that noticed something weird about me. What? Gasped Nikki again. And now Nikki was really not liking where this was going. Oh no, don't tell me there's been a shrink involved. Whenever I have a certain anxiety attacks, you have... Nikki, please, let me finish. Whenever I think about stuff... What stuff? Asked Nikki. But Michael didn't answer. When I think about stuff, he noticed how I start freaking out. He didn't ask me what was going on, and I told him I kept getting these thoughts that get stuck in my head. He asked, what type of thoughts? Shit that disturbs me or makes me feel depressed. He asked, how often does this happen? And then I realized I've had it all my life. What type of thoughts are they? Asked Nikki. Michael then just shook his head. Anyways, all of a sudden I had one right there. And then I blurted out rompus pompous, and he asked me why I said that. I told him that I didn't know. He asked me, do you do it often? Then I realized I do it almost every couple of minutes, and I told him that. He asked me if I do other stuff like that. And I told him how I kiss crucifixes a lot, sometimes rub it against my forehead and have thoughts of eating it. What? Gasped Nikki, as it all started to get weird. Yeah, Nikki, that also really made his eyes light up too, like yours now. Explained Michael, seeming more and more depressed the further he went on, telling Nikki all this. Michael, this is starting to sound like, I don't know. He didn't ask me if it made me feel better. I said, yeah. He then told me, Nikki, he told me, that looks like I have OCD. Nikki scratched her head for a second. All she knew of OCD was it had something to do with an impulse to wash one's hands. You mean washing hands? I don't quite remember you being that way, mentioned Nikki. Nikki, not everyone with OCD is Howard Hughes. Anything you obsess about can be OCD. Sex, violence, death, sicknesses, social anxieties, the future. Not all technically bad stuff, but if it's stuff that can bother you a lot, people like me get entrenched in thought, thinking about shit like that, and not knowing how to break away from it like normal people can. Michael, there's no such thing as normal. Thought Nikki, but didn't say. So my type like to then create triggers like washing hands or dealing with superstitious shit to break themselves away from the thoughts. Developing rituals, explained Michael. And then, as Nikki heard the word rituals, it all became clear. As Nikki began to understand, oh no. The memories with Michael during all those strange moments now came flooding back. Nikki began remembering how other weird habits he used to have, like flipping coins over and over and getting really upset whenever tails came up, kissing crucifixes as he just mentioned, and how he'd start speaking abstractly and was unable to break away from it, how he'd find something funny and keep repeating it over and over to himself to cheer himself up. Then there were those times he'd stay in water for hours on end and say it made him feel clean. And hearing Michael mention sex made Nikki begin to remember her share of experiences with Michael. Oh wow. As for those details, I'd rather not think about it right now, under this context. No, at the time, most of Nikki found it to be cute, maybe a little weird, but cute. But now realizing it might have had something to do with rituals, like some cloaked pagan occultist might conducting before a pentagram, Nikki began to feel really creeped out considering how much she had played a part in them. Oh, don't think of it like that, pagan cultist. That's just silly. It was nothing like that. So what if Michael had some fixations and fetishes? So what? His sexual obsessions were at least 1,000 times better than the things I was exposed to by 1999 regulars. Them and their fancies. But then something also came in mind over the matter of creepiness. Then there's that one time Michael really disturbed me. When I caught him staring at his hands intently, and he looked like he was having a conversation with them. And then I remember I had a nightmare that night. I remember vividly, and those hands of his were telling him to... Okay, stop thinking about all that. It's not like I don't have my own issues with evil. Thought Nikki as she shook her head. She didn't want to hear any more of this, and mostly because she saw how it was all affecting Michael. He looked just as pained over the realization that he was suffering from some possible mental illness as she was. But it's not that bad, is it? We all have something wrong with us. He said, sounds like rituals. How many more do you have? I told him about flipping quarters. Then after listening to me a bit further, he said that I also might possibly have bipolar disorder. A lot of stupid unresolved mommy and daddy issues, anger issues, territorial issues, and a bunch of other stuff. I mean, fucking shrinks. Give them a minute and they'll try to come up with 50,000 things that might be wrong with you. They act like they're there to help, but telling someone all this stuff just ends up making someone feel worse. But anyways, I guess what I really want to say to you, Nikki, is... Nikki paused as the expression on his face changed and he seemed more tranquil. He looked into Nikki's eyes as he began sending vibes to her that the story wasn't as bad as it sounded. Nikki picked up on this and felt a bit more relaxed. Nikki, these rituals, I see now for what they are. And things like flipping coins, I hate now with a passion and I feel like ceasing to do them, considering how they affect me, but I don't see all of them as such. What do you mean? Asked Nikki. What I'm saying is, it's all about what they make me feel. I understand that a lot of that shit I do is all about my way of combating all the negative shit I've built up over the years. I shouldn't think of them as rituals or whatever word a shrink would feed me with, because that just makes it sound weird. And it's not all bad, and I shouldn't let it get to me. Then don't, Michael, don't, said Nikki. But Michael didn't seem too assured that he could. Some of it, I think I like though. How's that? Asked Nikki. Because everyone does things to combat their negative feelings. That's normal. And I should see is that, in the end, it's all about keeping my mind at ease, giving it rest, and keeping it in control like a spell. Nikki lifted her head up. Like a spell? Asked Nikki. Yeah, replied Michael. And now Nikki now felt an inkling of where this story was going. Anyways, as for what LG made me realize about myself in prison, I spent a lot of time exploring this new self, reading, now that I came to the sense of how intelligent I could be. And then, surely enough, I found myself reading and understanding every book I came across. Magically almost, somehow. Magically? Thought Nikki. Now reading everything I could get my hands on and opening up my mind to everything. And I thought that was going to make me happy, but it didn't. Why is that? Asked Nikki, as that part started to make her curious. After everything Louis had told me, I grew very self-conscious. But you know what? The more I thought, the unhappier I got. I guess it has to do with that OCD. Whatever I read, I get obsessed with. I guess I get obsessed over. And thoughts and ideas and knowledge. And even though it could be simple medieval history, it started driving me crazy. All of a sudden, I'd be reading, and then I feel like I'm there, and I'm thinking about living conditions, shitting in a corner, a pile of hay, since there's no plumbing, and not cleaning up, not showering for weeks or months on end, and the stench of the market of people that did the same, rats carrying the Black Death, and being accused of being a heretic, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was as if though I was there, actually there. Nikki shook her head, as it felt like Mike was beginning to rant about stuff that really shouldn't bother him. Want to hear something funny? Asked Michael. Sure, go ahead, responded Nikki, feeling like humor could do for a change. One summer, I was bored and restless out of my mind, and I picked up a bunch of books to learn French, and I started cramming it all in my head. After 3 months, I knew the entire language, and the funny part is I felt like I forgot English. And then I couldn't stop speaking French to the other inmates, recounted Michael as he began to laugh. Little. Nikki tried to laugh, but it all still sounded a bit too much. I mean, I started getting major headaches, and the words kept spinning in my head, and for a second there, Nikki got excited at the thought of speaking French to Michael to see if he'd understand her. But hearing him talk about getting headaches made her refrain from doing so. And the next summer, I learned the entire German language in only 2 months, and okay, I understand, Michael, interrupted Nikki, finding none of this funny, also remembering how Michael picked up Spanish back in the day just by listening to Sassboy and his brothers speak. I learned then the problem was I was trying to fix something emotionally in me by seeking higher intellectual pursuits, and it just doesn't work that way. Knowledge might be power, but all the power in the world won't be able to fix a simple thing, like a man's broken emotional state, and trying to do so made it worse. I was so miserable here in prison, spinning ones and zeros in my head, so obsessed with thoughts that when I got out, I guess I subconsciously decided fuck being this way, rompous pompous, and I decided I was going to be a moron again and love it, since that's how I was before. And those were the days I was at my most happiest. Nikki began scratching the back of her neck again, as the story began to grow weird again. Rompous, pompous, what? What does that actually mean? Thought Nikki. I guess you can convince yourself anything with that whole think therefore I am bit, and when I got out, I then decided to convince myself I was a moron again. Michael then sighed as this all started to give Nikki a headache too. Oh, Michael, you're overthinking. Don't do that. That night, boom, I was coming back into action. I wanted to be the old idiot I was and revel in it. Fucking riding around on motorcycles on rooftops, fighting muscle-bound beefcakes with their own dumbbells and going around punching people in the face like in a John Wayne movie. And do it all with style. Nikki looked at Michael and saw him smiling now, recounting his moments. Muscle-bound gorillas? John Wayne? What? But to things that weren't making much sense to her again. But since that night, I realized to be my old self, that's an impossibility. I could never be my old self. That wasn't going to truly fix me, and all that I had of that now, my old self, was just an idea. Just an idea of what I thought I used to be, an idea of what I've only created recently. Michael, what does all that mean? Why is it important now? Asked Nikki. It means if I want to be happy now, I gotta be a new self. You can only move forward in life. You can't move backwards. That now made sense to Nikki. All right, Michael, you can do that. We can. But then Nikki saw a look in Michael's face as it seemed like what was really bothering him was now going to start rearing its ugly head. Also, besides convincing myself of that to be happier, there was a lot of other stuff I had convinced myself of, and a lot of stuff I was aware of that wasn't so good. Definitely not good at all. Like what? Asked Nikki. Like how Madboy had wronged me, and how you might have also. That now made Nikki feel uncomfortable to hear. There was something very cerebral about all this, expressionless and emotionless, and evil in a way that she didn't like. Michael, when you get absorbed into too much thought and overthink things, you can create a lot of things that don't add up, things that can make you see things in a warped way. And from my experience, it's never good. Nikki, that all ended up making me hate you and see you all weird. And you were the last person I would ever want to hate. I've already ended up hating too many people in my life, and I should have never done so. Ones that I should have really loved. My mother, my sister, my best friend Gabe, who was such a likable character, but even he came across as being pathetic to me at one point, and I ended up hating him too. Well, at least you've always loved your father, said Nikki. But then Michael began frowning up bad after hearing his name. No, fuck him. He's the one that has deserved most of the hate I've had. And that now completely threw Nikki off hearing, since Michael had almost always spoken highly of him, as if how he could never do anything wrong. Nikki now couldn't understand what would have changed in Michael to feel this. Although, honestly, from what I remember from meeting him, I don't think I've ever met a scarier man in my life. So maybe you have your reasons there. I don't know. I don't want to hate him either, but at least for now I feel like I have to. Nikki sighed as this all felt like uncharted territory again, but not in a place Nikki felt lost in, but felt weary of being, and would have liked to have started heading back. Michael, let's stop. But Michael didn't. And then I met the devil with a black hole in his pocket, and I made him cry. What? Gasped Nikki as she realized he was going full forward with that abstract thing again. Oh, nothing. I'm talking weird. What I mean is, I did something those Pentagon boys couldn't do. But then laughed in my face and didn't even want to believe me when I told them that I did. Michael, I can't follow. Don't worry. I'll tell you some of the stuff some other time. Michael paused again. I guess what I'm saying to you, Nikki, is once I got back here again, I said rompus pompous, meaning I felt like I could handle this again. And as hard as I tried, I then understood that I really can't. I mean, I can, but I also don't want to. Part of me is telling me I need to be alone. To face these demons, I have to, because dragging others into them wouldn't be fair. Part of me feels very religious now, very Christian. And I like that. I really, really like that now. Because it's doing for me what I thought everything I did that night would. Getting back to my old self would. It's really doing miracles. And giving me a sense of peace and rest I never thought I could. Nikki then bit her tongue. Not that she didn't like what she was hearing. She just also had her reservations when it came to that matter, since it was something that sort of scared her to think about. I mean, that whole night was me trying to resolve everything in my life, and I realize now you can't just do all that in one setting. Stuff like that takes time. Lots of time and change. I guess also there's a lot of things in me that I will never be able to fully resolve or fully understand, and maybe I'm not supposed to. Explained Michael, now looking depressed. Michael, you'll get out. And I told you I'll find a way to get you out with the connections I have, and I tried to not think too much about the other shit that happened to me that night, about what I did to. And then there's Mr. Dorian, and what scares the shit out of me now is realizing how similar that man is to me. Except he had really went over the deep end. And it scares me because I don't want that to happen to me too. Michael, I don't know exactly what you're talking about, but it won't. Nikki, I'm overthinking, I know. Yes, Michael, so stop. I can't. What do you mean you can't? I mean, I need you to. And then all of a sudden, Nikki started to see a shimmer of light. Nikki, part of me feels like it would be better for me to go completely alone, to resolve what I can about myself, but I don't want to. Part of me says I need to be alone, but I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be. And I want your magic, Nikki. I want your spells. I understand now that I love your manipulative ways. Actually, I don't even want to call them that because it sounds too ugly. For every time I remember you doing it to me, it was exactly like that Greasy story there. Or how you spoke about Tahiti at LeBron's place. You didn't want me to overthink a bunch of stupid shit, but to give me something that gave me a peace of mind. Michael smiled as he said that, but then cringed up again, with one final thought. That entire night long, I had my obsessive ways giving me reasons to hate everyone around me, and eventually even you. But I understand that now, and I won't let it happen again. There's only one person I really need to hate right now, and maybe that'll change things, eventually change me. Michael smiled, but then felt like continuing. Nikki, no more, Michael. Let me say this. I guess I'm kind of saying this to convince myself as much as you. Explained Michael as he cringed at the thought of what he just said. Okay, go on. And then all of a sudden, the devil behind all this reared its ugly head. Nikki, that's never going to happen again. I promise you, I swear I won't ever hurt you again. I'll never put my hands on you again. I'll never let my obsessive thinking get the best of me as it did that night. I'd rather kill myself 1,000 times over than to ever see you hurt in any way, shape, or form again. And now, finally, Nikki got what was the root of all this. What was really bothering Michael. Having him obsessing over that night, overthinking about it, and keeping him from the peace he needed.